everyone, and welcome to another episode of Delivered, the show where we talk about building successful products and businesses. My name is Georgios Athanasiadis. I'm your host and the managing director at Your Majesty, now part of Infinum. Today, I have another very interesting guest for you, Sam McCarthy. Sam is VP of Product at Sotheby, the leading auction house for fine arts and luxury objects. There, she leads a team developing platform and data services where they take decades of data around unique objects and making it accessible and actionable. Her work at Sotheby's is informed by previous experiences at art and entertainment startups, as well as an education in architecture and urban planning. Hello, Sam. Welcome to Delivered.
Hi. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you, Georgios.
Where are you calling in from?
I am in Brooklyn, New York right now. So it's fun to be chatting with you early in the morning, still working on my
appreciate
coffee.
it that you're calling in so early. Let's jump straight into it. Sam McCarthy, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career so far.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. Right now, I'm a VP of product at Sotheby's. I kind of found my way here in a bit of a meandering path. I studied urban planning and architecture in college. Realized it wasn't really what I wanted to do. Wanted to get into the music industry. Worked a bunch of different jobs. I've worked the door at a couple well-known places in New York, but ended up at a small music startup, basically, doing kind of more marketing, data entry, really entry-level type stuff. But it was a small company, and I found myself using our app and having a lot of complaints about it, frankly. So I would be pestering our tech lead constantly, just emails being like, why is this button here? The color is funky. The font is, why does it look like this? It's not doing what I think it's supposed to do. And he got pretty fed up and was like, look, here, this is Jira. This is how you can write a ticket. That's how it started. And we ended up doing a redesign of the application. I was very involved in that and was talking to someone in our co-working space, and they were like, oh, so you're like a product manager.
You have it.
And ultimately I was like, I don't know what that word is, but I guess. And yeah, so that person actually ended up hiring me, but I ended up taking a boot camp. And that was, I want to say back in it was a while ago now. But yeah, and that's how I got into product. Bounced around a couple different kind of music, entertainment, art startups, and then landed at Sotheby's. And I've been here since 2020.
Okay, 6 years. Nice work.
Yeah.
So tell us about joining Sotheby's, and maybe also, was there anything that surprised you about that company?
I joined in 2020. Very interesting time to be joining companies as a whole. And particularly, I think Sotheby's was a really interesting place at that time because obviously everything had gone fully remote. And Sotheby's, as a very traditional organization, was not accustomed to that at all. Of course, we have a lot of folks that travel for work, but this was not a remote first place for the longest time. And so joining at that point was really interesting. I was transparently a little hesitant I remember when I was interviewing, I was like, this place is by and large the oldest company I will ever work for if I land here. And for most people too. I was concerned that there was going to be a lot of red tape. I was concerned there was going to be, how do we do product in a company that's as old as this?
It's 300 years
And
old.
don't age us too far.
Okay,
We're not
rounding
quite
up.
300
Yeah,
yet, but 200 some. But Sotheby's was publicly traded for a time and was the oldest company on the stock market. It's tenured, you might want to say. But yes, I think these are probably concerns that anybody else would have, that how does a company like this function? It's not a tech company. I think most of us have an understanding that you can move fast, you can experiment. And the oldest tech companies we can think have been around for a minute, but that it's a matter of degrees how much older Sotheby's is. And I remember when I was interviewing the woman who would be my then boss made a comment that she was like, it's like working at a startup. And I remember being like, is it really? Is that really possible at a company that's been around for this long? But she was surprisingly
Okay.
more right than I knew, because we were going through such a period of change that for a long time, the product and development organization rolled up into marketing, because that's what a lot of websites were for a very long time, right? It's not where you could really do anything. You go and you just see something is being promoted, and then you go into a IRL experience to buy your movie tickets or do whatever, like that's what it was for a long time. But since then, it's evolved quite a lot. We develop a lot of our own products in-house, and there was a surprising amount of it's for a company that's been around for as long as it has, we do a lot of different things. And so there's always a lot of problems to solve, a lot of things to be improved. And I think I was most surprised I was able to identify some pretty big challenges that I was given the leeway to run with and solve, which is fully not what I was expecting. And it's been a really interesting and fun journey, frankly. It's frustrating at times, as it always is in product development, but pretty rewarding.
That's cool. So how would you speak to all the kind of ways that Sotheby's now apply modern tech to improve its client experiences, but also to stay ahead with there is a few other auction houses of
Mhm.
similar size and influence as Sotheby's.
A lot this kind of goes back to the modernization of everything that we're doing, right? We cover a lot of stuff, and thinking about the type of property and the artwork that we sell, the value of the things that people expect from us, you can't just use USPS
No,
shipping for things, for example. That does need to be somewhat bespoke in many cases, and that's something that we have to handle. How we interact with our clients is going to be very different from, say, someone who's what's a good example? Just say
yeah,
the average social media user. The average person is not going to be, unfortunately, purchasing a
yeah,
lot of the stuff that we sell. But so there's very different relationship that we have with clients as well. Doing things like personalization, giving someone the experience of landing on a website or using our app and being able to feel like we know what you're expecting. Like we know that you're interested in these things and you're a watch collector. So we're going to give you a lot of watches to look at. And maybe these are some interesting watches that are similar to things that you've
yeah,
kind of poked around in the past. Or we know you've been buying watches for a long time. Are you interested in some art? Maybe there's something related there. And beyond that, it's to go back to the more boots on the ground shipping pieces. How do we make sure that you feel comfortable that your very expensive artwork is being handled correctly and is you have confidence that it's going to be delivered in a way that respects you as a client and the
yeah.
work
Because I
itself.
mean, it's all almost always one-offs, right? I mean, it's some of the rarest objects on the planet, and all of them come in different sizes and shapes. So do
Yes.
you have like, can you do as, I would order something on Amazon. It's like, oh, your
Mhm.
artwork is being prepped for delivery. Do you have the infrastructure in place to like offer that kind of like digital hand holding or in notification of information as an object is under delivery, or is it more high touch or manual work?
It is a little high touch. I think if anyone, this is something that you don't really think about, but to your point, the artworks are one of ones. We don't have there isn't really like a default
No, exactly.
box
Yeah.
size for a piece of art. They come in many different shapes and sizes, and that makes it really difficult to build experiences that cover every use case because unfortunately, and this does sound maybe a little dramatic, but everything does need to be treated
Yeah.
kind of one of one. Some things not so much. For example, if you buy a watch, right? Like a Rolex is generally the same size across the board. It'll all fit in kind of the same watch box. So things like that, we can have more standardized experiences for our clients where we can say things like, yes, this thing is, you purchased it, it's been packaged and shipping, you'll be receiving it on this date. Artwork gets a little bit fuzzier just because you do things people may not know, if you buy artwork online, they often have to build a custom
Yeah,
crate
of
for it,
course.
and that is dependent, yeah, and that's dependent on the labor that's available. Not always, and not everybody knows how to build a crate. It's actually a fairly specialized piece of work. So that can add timelines, there's unexpected delays, and the more as we know, the more steps to the process, the more unpredictable the delivery time is. So it's harder So in those cases, it is generally more white glove, but this is something that, I think we're very much looking towards how do we make this easier, whether it is using like an agent that can help us navigate that. We don't need to have someone custom writing, hey, your artwork has been boxed up and it's ready to ship every single time. But maybe we can have something that can read that in our interactions with vendors or whoever and make sure that's communicated to the client.
Very interesting. So on the topic then, the next question is on challenges. You also touched on it already a little bit, but what would you say are the biggest challenges in digitizing a physical experience or like physical experiences? You have live auctions and then you have your catalog, and what's the
Mhm.
challenges there?
It's not so much the tech itself, because it's really the mindset of how the business thinks about things. I remember someone an anecdote with me a couple of years ago. So we all think about auctions and you think about
Yeah.
people on the phone in the fancy room, and that's like really what comes to mind. But there was a time where the idea of having phone bidding was a scandal. People were like, "Why would you ever?" I would call somebody on the phone and they
Yeah.
would do this for me. People were accustomed to physically being in the room themselves and doing this. And the idea that you're like, I would call someone across the country and they would, how would this all work? It was, there was a lot of resistance to that. It was very new.
And that's almost
Um,
standard now,
and in
right?
some ways
You
that
have you see someone
yeah,
holding up the
you get
thing,
every,
right?
yeah, it's in movies, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
people that it's a thing, but there was a time where that was, like, absolutely unthinkable, and there was resistance to doing something like that. Phones new tech
300
and this is,
years
again,
or
speaking to how old the
200
company is,
yeah, yeah.
phones were a new technology. It's we're not as resistant now, and phones are no longer considered new, but I alluded to 2020 being a time that was a lot of change, and we got forced and led into really being more accepting of kind of new ways to do business. We were really lucky that going into 2020, Sotheby's had already been doing
Yeah.
hosting auctions online, some of the more experimental stuff. And since then, being forced to put everything remote really put fuel on the fire. So we've been able to develop that. And I think just that whole experience has actually helped a lot in terms of thinking about using technology in new ways. And yes, there was an adjustment period. I think when I first joined, there's still a lot of kind of growing pains. We were being pushed to grow very fast. But it's and sometimes we still run into pockets of this of why, how can I use what is this for? Why would I use it this way? But being able to help people change the mindset that technology is not just there to do tasks. It's an actual tool that can proactively help you do things, and you can use this to there's data that you can use to inform your experiences with clients, to inform how we interact with clients, to see how we can make our experiences better. It's not all just, I talked to this person and now this is how we're going to do it, and this is the request that I'm making. But yeah, and we're seeing people experimenting with new tools. I think anyone in product can sometimes find this a little frustrating where you're talking to someone and they mention 5 other tools that they're using that you didn't realize that were in circulation, and you're like, "Oh, what are you using them for? Tell us all of these things." And seeing that experimentation is really nice. But yeah, it's a shifting piece. The mindset is can be challenging, but it's changing, and it's really neat to be able to see people excited for some of the things that we're building. And yeah.
That's very cool. So with a brand that's like 200 something years old, a lot of heritage, a lot of tradition, but now also, innovating in your field, how on like an internal level or a cultural level, how does Sotheby's balance that tradition with innovation?
Yeah, it's always a fine line. Many of us in the product and development orgs don't necessarily come from an art or kind of more traditional business background. So some of us are used to, we can just experiment and we can do all this stuff and it's fine. Um, the flip side is that, like you said, we're a 270 some year old brand. There's a lot of weight around that. People have expectations. You say Sotheby's, and people think this is
Yeah.
a custom experience. This is something where you're going to be treated. White glove is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Um, Also thinking about the size of our
Yeah.
user slash client pool is significantly smaller than what many people would expect. You think about we're buying
Yeah.
things you think about eBay, right? Which is You might maybe a counterpart, maybe not, but I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know the number of users
Millions,
they
right?
have, but I'd
Yeah.
imagine it's in the tens of millions. It's millions. We do not have millions of clients or users. We might have millions of visitors to our website, but people that transact with us is a much smaller pool. And what this means is that we can't, unlike eBay, we cannot afford
No.
to burn a couple clients with, a feature that rolls out that maybe is a little bit buggier than it should be, or an experience that gets rid of something that some people really like. We can't really afford to do that and to run experiments that way. Um, what it means is that we just have to be extremely rigorous in our user testing, in all the testing in general, and really be sure of what it is that we're rolling out and why we're doing it and how much are we willing to burn, essentially. Luckily, most of this, because we do have such a client-facing group of staff, it means that we also actually have many more boots on the ground to help walk clients through new experiences, which is a big difference again from eBay, which like you don't have a group of folks that are interacting with,
Yeah, they need to
most of
generalize a lot
their
more.
users.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it's nice to have that, but it also means that we get a lot of internal feedback. We get people that are saying, my client who I was talking to was really confused about this thing on the app. Why did you do it? And being ready to have those answers and making sure that's all kind of socialized really well also, so that we don't want our specialists, the people that talk to our clients, on the back foot when they're talking about the company and, the things that we're rolling out. So it's, in some ways, yeah, it's not the usual kind of experimentation path that you might expect, but we've found ways to make it work so that we can still move forward without being too conservative in what
Got it.
in what we're building.
So on all these things, what would you say is the hardest thing to modernize? Is it the systems you have or the processes, or yeah, you alluded to mindset as well, if you would grade those?
Mhm. Yeah. Mindset is certainly a thing, and this is bringing it back home for me because I work on a lot of products that are more data oriented, and that's actually one of the and this relates to the mindset as well, but and this is gonna resonate, I think, with a lot of listeners, is that we hear good data, bad data, garbage in, garbage out, and that's a mindset that we're having to coach people on a little bit, that we generate a lot of data. We've been around for a super long time. We have a lot of data. That's a huge challenge for us. How do we make all of that useful?
It's also a massive
We
asset, right?
we have
And like you have so
absolutely.
much proprietary, your own data that you could do all kinds of things. We'll dig into
Mhm.
that in a bit, but please continue.
So the challenge is not just getting the data to be usable, it's also identifying, is it worth us going back 270 some years to get the data for sh do we
Yeah.
want to convert all of it into something that's digital? Sometimes it might be worth it, but evaluating that, but a lot of it is coaching folks into, if you wanna be using our data tools, like, you do need to be
Yeah.
making good data too, right? A lot of our specialists are people that write the content that goes in about every object. It's the size, it's the dimensions, it's how we measure it, it's the colors, it's what it's made of. If we can't capture that consistently, and of course there's tools to help us extract it from whatever is written, but that is costly, right? It costs money, it costs dev time. And if we can do it right from the start, why not? So there's a massaging and a coaching of, hey, you want to see results in this application, you're gonna need to start making it nice in this one over here, and coaching folks to do that. So that's a little bit of mindset, but also really speaks to some of the challenges that we have around how do we get our arms around a data set that is pretty unique. We talk about these objects. We don't have hundreds of the same thing that we could reuse. They are one of ones. And how do we make sure that is produced in a way that we can actually do something interesting with it down the line and kind of inform folks on what's going on in the market. What are specific clients interested in? That kind of stuff.
Interesting. So, what are you working on right now? Tell us about you're working on a product right now, and
Yeah.
is there any AI in there? How do you use AI in your work?
Yeah, so like I alluded to, I'm kind
Yeah.
of more in the data space these days. I started out in more of the application kind of user-facing products. when I first started at Sotheby's. And since, again, we've evolved a lot as an organization just in the 6 years that I've been here. I now head our objects platform team. So this is all of our tools, services that deliver object data to our various applications. So our
And an
users really
object here
are
is
more
a
engineers and developers.
object, a thing that you're selling. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, it's
exactly.
the
Yeah,
physical, it's an artwork. Yes. Obviously, there's different terminologies around that, but yes, for us, the objects platform is the
yeah,
physical artworks, the objects, the items that we sell. And one of the challenges that we had going into this is that we used to be more vertically integrated. Every product was end to end, which also meant that everyone had their own idea of what an object was. Our shipping tools didn't really care what it was made of, don't really how, who the artist is doesn't really matter when you're shipping something from point A to point B. So they didn't capture that data. But if we're putting something online, you care very much who the artist is, but you might not care as much how much it weighs. So how do we standardize that? How do we make sure that, but ultimately these things are the same. And it was challenging to move from one point to the other, to go from I sold this thing, it is by Andy Warhol, I don't know how much it weighs, to we're shipping it, I don't really care who the artist is, it's 200 pounds, I don't know. But we were losing data along the way, and it was having to get recreated at various steps. And so what we've done is looked to standardize that so that there's a single place and a single way of thinking about our objects, and applications can add to or remove or rather ignore data that they don't need. But it means that we have a through line through as something moves through our ecosystem. It also means that we can now actually start tracking these objects through time, right? We get the same piece of information.
yeah,
We do resell things. Things will get sold in the 90s that come back, clients talk to us about them, and then maybe they ultimately decide to sell. We want to be able
yeah,
to know it's the same thing that we sold back in 1998. So the products that I'm working on now, yeah, are really about transforming the data that we have into something that people can use to do both research. We have to do a lot of research to make sure the artworks that we're selling and the luxury items that we're selling are the things that we say they are. Again, this goes back to brand. The integrity and authenticity is a huge piece. And again, a lot of that is the history of the work, what we call provenance.
yeah,
That's a term that you'll see in the art world a lot. It's who owned this previously, what museum exhibit was it in, how did it get to be here, whose
yeah,
hands did it pass through, and being able to link those things together is a huge part of
yeah,
selling art, and a challenge because we sell a lot of art, and being able to connect all of these pieces through time can be really difficult. And so we're building this to help our teams be able to move faster so they're not having to dig as deep or remember, hey, I remember maybe this was sold in a sale 30 years ago. Who was the person that sold it? How many people do I have to talk to track down this bit of information? And being able to collate that all in one place is a big chunk of the work that we have today.
cool. And a bonus question on those things, on using AI
Mhm.
and those kind of things. How do you use
Ah, yes.
AI in your daily work? Do you have like favorite Samantha trick?
It's not necessarily a daily activity for us. This is maybe a more interesting way that it gets used is that I mentioned that
Yep,
we're building timelines essentially of artworks history. And part of the way that we're doing that is there's computer vision and LLMs that we use to help us identify whether or not these things are the same. In the example I gave before, we sold
yep,
something in 1998, say, and we're selling it again this year. How do we know that those are the same thing? We have photos. The picture in 1998 might be kind of
yes,
blurry, not as good as the one that we have today. We might have similar text. The artist might be the same, the title of the work. There's a lot of untitled artworks out there, which makes this difficult, but you have the description that somebody wrote at one point or another. So there's a bunch of different data points that we can use to say, hey,
yeah,
these two things are the same. And if we want to end up somewhere where we can see literally a timeline of we sold this in 98, the client came back, we need to be able to connect them. And so we're using, like I said, I think we use some
yep,
tools that use computer vision and LLMs together so that we can say There's a pretty decent chance this is the same thing. Again, as with artwork, sometimes it's not totally sure. And so a tool that we've actually built that makes use of all of this is a way for a person to go in and just confirm when our algorithms come to a conclusion that, like, I think this is somewhere between, say, 75 and 85% might be a match. Anything less, we don't assess just because it's very unlikely that it's actually a match. But what we'll do is anywhere in between those, we'll have folks go in and confirm whether or not these things are the same. And we can learn that way also, right? Is that for these types of works, the image is not as actually as important. We end up with things with the pictures the same because sometimes we have editions of multiple, like Andy Warhol prints. Many of them look very similar, but the text description is gonna be very different. So how do we consolidate it? So the tool that we use, this is an activity that the team goes through every so often, but it's really neat to be able to see the conclusions that these tools are coming to and being able to help train it a little bit. And so that's a way that we're using it, but it improves our data set. We get new data in all the time, and it's also a good way to learn a little bit more about the art that we're selling. It's a fun little
It's
activity,
awesome. I
but
mean, that's
an
like,
important one.
because I mean, like data is all the rage now, because you need data to train your models with, and for a company to have
Mhm.
so much rich heritage and data of all of that stored, it's a good time to be Sotheby's. Nice. But I mean, it must also be
Yeah.
challenging, which leads me to the next question, right? So building complex products within a non-technical company, what would you say are the biggest challenges?
I think as a product person, a big part of our job is selling what you're building. And that's where this complexity comes in, particularly because of how abstract a lot of these concepts might be for folks. I don't understand why all your applications need to care about things in the same way. Like, why are you,
Well,
what
you
is the
mean like
purpose of this
internal
work?
stakeholders and in that?
Um, Well, yes, but also,
Yeah,
like the CEO needs to understand what we're building
yeah,
because
yeah,
we're
exactly.
spending that money. We're taking our team could be building other
Yeah,
things. Why is this a priority? And being able to sell that roadmap and really explain this is why we think it's important to invest in this and this product, particularly when it's something that is not something that people, we're very used to products that people can
yeah,
see and interact with, but when you're building data products, you only really see it's the tip of the iceberg, right? That's really what people are seeing,
that's
but
right.
there's so much
Yeah,
that more that goes into it. And that's the bulk of the work also, right? Building a UI to sit on top of this is
exactly.
the
Yeah,
cherry on top in a lot of ways. But what a lot of folks don't necessarily see that aren't in the tech space is that this is an enormous amount of work. People are so used to using things like ChatGPT and LLMs today. This was like decades of work to get to this point. This wasn't something that someone just dreamed up 3 years ago and suddenly we have this product. This was years and years of work. And so being able to sell that in a company that we do a billion other different things and saying, "Hey, of this laundry list of things that we need to do, I think this is the most important thing for my team to be building." You gotta have a good story. You have to have a really convincing roadmap that lets people understand what that is. And so a tool that I like to use, tool is maybe a stretch for the word, but analogies have been really, really helpful for me of like understanding, helping people who aren't technical understand why is this important. And one of the analogies that I use a lot is you think about the infrastructure in a city. I mean, this kind of maybe goes back to my
yeah,
education in
yeah,
urban planning and such, but thinking about data as the infrastructure in a city, right? There's electricity. Everybody uses electricity in one way or another. As the, I guess, power plant, maybe. I don't really
hmm,
care how you're using it. You might be a restaurant, you might be a home, a business. I don't really care how you're using it. You
yeah,
just need to be able to get it. And it needs to be given to you in a way that is understandable and you can turn it into something that's useful. And so that's the analogy that's actually landed pretty well. To be fair, I went through a couple different
yeah,
iterations of this. Some were not like left people scratching heads, but this is the one that stuck. But being that I think has been a really helpful way to explain to folks, why is it important
yeah,
for us to do this? Because again, to kind of kind of follow this path, the analogy that I gave was what we did before was everybody had to install their own solar
That's
panels,
cool.
and
Nice.
one person had a
Yeah.
windmill and one person had and that's all great and it works a little while, but when your city gets big, that
Yeah.
isn't super effective. You need more space. It costs more. If my house is run on solar power and I'm the only person doing it, if my solar goes out, I'm out of luck. How do I make sure that doesn't happen? Of course, there's again risks to having a bigger service like that. If we go out, everybody goes out. But again, that's why, we have to, the measuring and the metrics that we have to keep things up are pretty important. But that's been a really helpful way to communicate that. And it's been, I think, a big help in getting people to understand what it is that we're doing and understanding the value of this kind of work that isn't necessarily super visible all the time,
Right.
but drives a lot.
So this show is called Delivered, and therefore we ask all the guests the same things. What is the best thing that you have delivered in your career so far?
So far,
Doesn't
I
have to be
think
career. Yeah.
we've got a couple new products. Correct. We've got a couple new products that have come out that I'm pretty proud of, but I've been in a
Yeah.
managerial role for a little while, so I don't want to take credit for a lot of the work that my team's doing, but something that I was really proud of when I was in a more of an IC position. We had a product called Get Images. Super simple sounding, but this was something that saved a lot of my coworkers a lot of time. We had a legacy system, it's actually still around, that we use to handle a lot of the photography. There's a lot of photography that happens at Sotheby's. And those images get edited and evolved and changed, and they need to end up being used somewhere. And how do we pipe them into
Yeah.
our DAM? How do we get them onto our website, etc.? The workflow used to be that some poor person would have to go into this old system, download every single image that they wanted onto their computer, and then upload it again to where it needed to go, which
My
is
goodness. Yep.
tedious as hell. No one wants to do that. It was one of the things we would do user interviews and people were like, this is the number one time suck. I don't want to do this. And this is something we went back and forth on a bunch because again, this legacy system, it didn't have like a really functional staging environment, which meant it was really hard for us to really build something functional out of it. It made it really difficult to do that. But long story short, we figured out how to actually get this connected. There's a bunch of different triggers there, but now there's a handy dandy little button that sits in our CMS that delivers everything that you see on the website and the app. It's just called Get Images. And so when people flag things and the legacy system is ready, you hit Get Images, and lo and behold, a little while later, they show up. I think it's in the next 10 minutes. Some of these images are very big, to be fair, but they end up in our CMS. And it sounds like a very small kind of achievement, but it saved a lot of time. And this is one of those features that when we rolled it out and let people know about it, a couple days later, people are like, thank you for doing this. And that's always really a great feeling to have when people are just really happy with what you've built. So that
Love that.
definitely a
Love that. I
highlight.
think anyone who ever worked with a CMS would recognize the feeling of having to do these type of.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a lot of fresh content. So it was really, I think when we tallied up, we made some a back of napkin estimates as to what this was. And I think it came to about a full year's worth of time was being spent downloading and uploading images. And now it's a matter of hours.
Nice work.
So
All
thank you.
right. That was great. Thank you, Sam, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I did. And like I said, thank you
Good,
for
good,
having
good.
me.
Then I wish you a great rest of your day. Take care.
And
Bye bye.
likewise, have a good one.
Before you go, if this conversation got you thinking about how to modernize your brand with technology while staying true to who you are, that's actually the kind of things that we've been working with at Infinum and Your Majesty for the past 20 years. You can learn more about how we can help at infinum.com or yourmajesty.co. And if you want more conversations like this, visit infinum.com/delivered to subscribe or subscribe to the Delivered newsletter or wherever you find your podcasts. See you next time. Peace.